Human trafficking thrives on the movement of people, mostly women and children, from one place to another within a country's territorial borders as well as across borders on the promise of good job opportunities, sponsorships, free education and better lives abroad, only for victims to get there and realize the promises made were false and far from reality. Currently, human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar industry, ranked third in the list of the world's transnational crimes after drugs and arms trafficking. Subsequently, the United States Department has placed Kenya in Tier 2 as far as human trafficking is concerned. This simply means that, despite the Kenyan government acknowledging that human trafficking exists in Kenya, it has done so little in terms of legislation and formulation of policies to curb the vice.
The U.S. State Department ranks countries in Tier 1, 2, and 3. And Tier 1 countries are actually countries that acknowledge that they have a problem in trafficking, and they are doing very concerted efforts towards eradicating trafficking in persons. Now, Kenya under Tier 2 basically means that it has not met the minimum standards that are set.
According to a report by the International Labour Organization, ILO, there are over 1.3 million children working in Kenya at any given time of the year, 41.3% of whom are aged between 10 and 14. Meanwhile, a recent survey by the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, on the extent and effect of sex tourism and sexual exploitation of children at the Kenyan coast indicates that some 30,000 Kenyan children are involved in commercial sex activities in and around the Kenyan coast. The report goes further to reveal that the most notorious countries whose citizens flock the Kenyan coast for all manner of sexual exploitation include Italy, Germany and Switzerland, who are willing to pay anything for sexual relations with children, especially young boys, who are mostly used for sodomy.
Anal sex as paying more than the ordinary sex. So even if girls and boys who are willing to allow their client to perform anal sex earn a premium on that.
The most common form of exploitation that is taking place at the coast is sexual exploitation of child victims of trafficking, and this is because there is also economic benefits that is actually being derived by the people who have their children involved in this trade at the coast. Places like Malindi, where you actually told that the children who are there, especially the boy child, is much more at risk at sexual violence because the tourists who are there pay more when they get sexually involved with a boy child as compared to a girl child.
It's such alarming statistics that prompted the Cradle Children Foundation, with support from the European Union and Kind of Not Life, to carry out research and unravel the continuing mystery of child trafficking in Kenya, especially in Malindi, Watamu, Kilifi, Mtwapa, Ukunda, not to mention Mombasa, a transit and destination point where most victims arriving from the DRC, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia find their way to South Africa and end up in Canada and Europe as domestic workers, farm and factory laborers, as a huge chunk work in brothels as sex workers. In Malindi alone, there have been several similar cases where foreigners pose as sponsors seeking to support children only to turn out to be child abusers. In one incident, a 17-year-old orphan was put under the care of an Italian national who later flew him to Italy for a holiday visit, but the boy never came back. The concerned children's officer has reliably learnt that the boy is not in school and is using all machinery at his disposal to get him back.
A sponsor took a child to Italy who was in one of the institutes in the district for a visit. That was last year, July, 6th July. But as I speak, the child has not come back.
In the year 2006, The big hotels at the coastal region signed a code of conduct not to allow underage girls to their hotels in a bid to curb the rising cases of sexual exploitation. But the pattern soon changed, and the illicit trade moved to middle-class hotels on the outskirts of Mombasa, where victims of trafficking are engaged in pornography, strip dancing in nightclubs, and others employed to work in agricultural farms, factories, households, and also trained as child soldiers by joining militia groups, among other illegal gangs. Apart from the usual trafficking for purposes of sexual exploitation and forced labor, there's an emerging trend where victims of trafficking are targeted for the sole purpose of organ harvesting. Several children have in the recent past been reported missing, only for their mutilated bodies to be found with several organs missing.